in our normal rooms. We have a special event going on today in room 216 for Senator Chazanal. So we're going to meet up here. On the agenda, first agenda, you'll see House Bill 1239. This is a strike all amendment with the Senate language in the bill. This is the bill we passed for data centers. It creates a sales and use tax exemption for an initial spend of at least $250 million with 35 new jobs. It also has a requirement that they spend another $100 million over 10 years to have an extension on the sales and use tax for another period of 10 years. That is the explanation of the bill. It's the Senate version. We have it here. I'll be happy to entertain any questions. Seeing none for a motion. Title sufficient do pass as amended. Strike all. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. That bill will be reported out. Next is House Bill 1878. Senator Rhodes, recognize you to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 1878 comes to us from the House. It is a companion bill to the ad valorem tax bill that we passed a couple of weeks ago. It was the one that was dealing with all the tax valuations on rural structures. We went over it in here and again on the floor. I think we passed it 50-1, but it's the exact same bill. Is there any questions about the bill?
Are there any questions on the bill for Senator? Senator McMahon, for question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This doesn't deal with anything except farm and agricultural structures. Is that correct?
That's correct. Secondary rural structures as is listed in the tax valuation manual from DOR.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right. Any other questions? Seeing none for a motion.
Title sufficient do pass.
All right. Motion is title sufficient do pass. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. Bill be reported out. Next is House Bill 1880. This is a strike all with the Senate language that we passed and with a reverse repealer in it. We're still working on some language on the bill for the Movie Industry Act. So just creates a tax credit based on the revenue generated from activities for production that occurs in Mississippi. And it provides a rebate based on payroll, based on sales and use tax spend that was in the state of Mississippi on activities that occur in the state. And that is the explanation of the bill. We're going to continue to work with the House and some others to try to finish up the language on this before the end of session. Be happy to yield for any questions. Seeing none for a motion. Motion is title sufficient do pass as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. Next is House Bill 1896. Senator Filligan, you going to handle this one?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe 1896, it has a proposed committee substitute amendment to add a reverse repealer if I'm looking at the right one. So do you want me to explain that amendment first?
Sure.
I think given the subject matter of the taxation of Kratom, we're still in negotiations with the House, obviously, and Chairman Harkins, I think, would appreciate having a reverse repealer. So I would offer that amendment to begin with.
Questions on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of adopting the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
And then if you'll notice, Mr. Chairman, on line 27, as it comes to us from the House, there's a 15% tax placed on the forms of Kratom products. Currently, I think it's taxed just like any other product at 7%, but as it comes from Chairman Horan in the House, they're asking for a 15% tax on the manufacturer's list price. That's what the bill does, of course, minus the reverse repealer we just added.
Are there any questions on the bill? Seeing none for a motion.
Title sufficient do pass as amended.
Motion is title sufficient do pass as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. And bill be reported out. Next is House Bill 1897. Senator Boyd, recognize you to explain the bill.
This piece of legislation is very similar to what I am told is something similar to what they do in the Golden Triangle region. This would be an alliance between Tate County, Panola, Lafayette, and Yalobusha counties that would create a regional alliance for the purpose of engaging in economic development projects in those counties. It also authorizes the Board of Supervisors to levy a special ad valorem tax and general obligation bonds to carry out the provisions of those acts. And also gives then provides a surety like MDA would be provided in looking at those projects and giving granting permission for some of those things to happen. And so that's a general explanation of what the bill does. They've been working on this regional alliance kind of for some time, trying to determine if that is in the best interest of the counties in those areas. And I'm happy to yield to questions or pitch to Senator Whaley to add anything at this time if he wants to.
Are there any other questions? Senator Simmons for a question?
Question, Mr. Chairman.
Recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Board or Senator Whaley, how many areas of the state have we actually formed this type of alliance with multiple counties?
Senator Simmons, I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay.
I know we do have some others in the state, even some others in our own region. And so I know that we're kind of basing this really a lot off the Golden Triangle region and what they've done and been successful in that area.
I'm very, very, very supportive for your area, to make your area like the Golden Triangle area. I was just concerned about, like, for Senator Chazanal, Thomas, Jordan, if we could actually look at this for the Mississippi Delta as well.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Board, for yielding.
Senator McMahon for a question?
Yeah, I'd like to speak on it at the appropriate time for the vote.
Are there any other questions on the bill? All right, you recognize, Senator Brumfield for a question?
Yes, question, Mr. President,
Recognized.
Mr. Chairman. Yes, Senator, I want to know, have you all, I guess, engaged in any studies or anything to suggest that this is successful? And if so, would it be possible for you to share your studies so that others in the state can benefit from it?
Senator, each of the counties has done independent studies, and those economic developers and those boards of supervisors have worked together collaboratively, kind of looking at those individual studies. There's one huge ongoing one that is being done like in Lafayette County right now. And I think they would be more than happy to kind of share those studies once they're completed.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, Senator McMahon, you're recognized to speak on the bill.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'm speaking in support of this legislation. A little over 20 years ago, some counties and cities came together and created the Pool Alliance. And because of that effort, we now make the #1 selling car in the United States of America in Union County, Mississippi, which is the Toyota plant. And that is an alliance of Lee County, Pontotoc County, Union County, and Lee County. And there's some cities that were allowed to be in that pool alliance at that time, but this legislation appears only to be counties. But this is a game changer, and what we do here today will yield fruit, maybe not immediately, but in the next decade, it'll be a generational change for those counties. I'm in support of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Jordan, you have a question? You're recognized.
What kind of, what are you going to produce there? Let's talk about that just a little so I understand that whether Delta is missing out or not. Carry on.
Thank you, Senator Jordan. And Senator Jordan, you have part of, you and I share part of Pinella County with us. There's some, particularly with the corridor that we have of I-55 that goes along through there, and air transport in Memphis and different things like that. There's a number of different regional opportunities, and there's not one that's just been identified at this point. We have a lot of synergy among those 4 counties. And I will tell you, I'm very pleased because what one county has, the other county doesn't. And so they are trying to develop a 4-county group that that they build each other up. So if one has a weakness in one area, the other can go in that area. So that's what they're doing right now, but there's nothing that's been explicitly identified right now. We know that we have the resources and that together we're much stronger.
Well, the concept is good. That's why I was inquisitive about it. It's not a bad idea, and I'm glad that I have part of some of that area, but I'm concerned about the Delta just as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Jordan. Any further questions? All right, for a motion. Motion is title sufficient to pass. All those in favor say aye. All opposed? Close ones. All right. Next, that bill will be reported out. Next is House Bill 1902. Recognize Senator Johnson to explain.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill involves tax credits, including the Children's Promise Act. What we put back in on line 182 and where you can see that something was deleted, that would return that language to current language. And then additionally, we would add a reverse repealer to it. And so that's an explanation of what the bill from the House did and what the amendment would do. And I move adoption of the amendment if there's no questions.
Questions on the amendment? Seeing none for adoption of the amendment, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Have it. Back on the bill.
And so on the bill, all that's left in the bill is a reverse repealer and the language that would max out the, at 3% to any one organization. And if there's no questions, move title sufficient to pass as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Johnson, I assume that with the amendment, the subsequent sections, section 2, 3, 4, and all that is still in the bill as well, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Well, I think I've glanced at those, but what I'm concerned about is the Children's Promise Act. With the amendment, the current language now is just to extend the existing program at the existing amount for 1 year.
I believe, I don't think it has a cap on the year. What came from the House had a dead stop at 24, so now we'd be deleting that, so there wouldn't be an end date on the, I believe it's 18 million that's in there.
I think it's 16, isn't it?
No, it's 18 million. It was 16,
Oh, I'm sorry.
22.
Calendar year 25, yes.
Yep.
So remind me how this works. The Children's Promise Act, 18 million a year. Where's this money come from and how does it work and who gets it?
Yes, so, and my understanding is that it's limited to businesses and individuals. It will, you make you have to get approved with the Department of Revenue and maybe the Department of Education as well. And I've never done one of these, so I just want to make sure I tell you correctly. Once you get approval, you make that donation at the specified time, and you get up to a 50% deduction from your tax liability on income taxes, and I believe ad valorem is in there as well.
So the taxpayer, and is it a business or can it be an individual?
Let me verify that with you. On, let's see.
I think it's on line 122. Is that where
Yes,
we're
tax
looking?
credits authorized by section that are earned by a partnership, limited liability company, S corporation, or similar pass-through entity.
So that's who,
I do not see where an individual is listed.
and so the gist of it is if I, just for round numbers, let's say I owe $100,000 in taxes. I think you're looking here.
I believe it's strictly businesses. I'm sorry.
Okay, so let's say I have a business and I owe $100,000 in taxes. And if I want to, I can pay $50,000 to the state and I can pay
I'm pay $100,000 to the state, and then the state takes half of that, $50,000, and gives it to a charitable organization, which almost all the entities on the list are private schools.
I think you get approved to give that money directly to the school.
The individual gets approved or the school gets approved?
Well, I think that the business, because it's not an individual, so it's a business. So if you are a business that has tax liability, you can get approved to give money directly to that school. And then that money that you give is a direct tax credit to what you owe in taxes.
So under the scenario I was just putting forward, I owe $100,000 in taxes.
Yes.
I can pay $50,000 in taxes.
Yes.
And I can give $50,000 to
A school.
a private school.
Well, yes, I mean,
Because a public school is not eligible under the current law.
it would be
It has to be a private school, isn't that right?
yes, and there's a wide variety of schools. It could be special needs as well.
But there's no requirement that they be special needs there's no requirement that the school cater exclusively to special needs or have any particular expertise in educating special needs students.
Not that I'm aware of, no.
And does the state have any oversight or any way to know for the receiving school what they're doing with the money that they receive?
I'm sorry.
Does the state have any oversight or any accountability or any way to know what is being done with the money that was not paid in taxes but was instead donated to the private school?
Yep.
So they get the money, half of the business's tax obligation to the state, and as long as the school's on the list and as long as the taxpayer's on the list, that's the end of the oversight.
Correct. There is a list of things online, beginning on line 104,
Okay.
that the school does have to commit to doing. As far as direct oversight, it's limited to the certification under.
So they have to be a 501c3 and certify that they don't perform abortions at the school? Is that in what lines? And
That's the first two, and there's a couple more.
they use it for education and anything else that the department requires. Do we know if the department, is that the Department of Revenue?
Yes.
Do you aware of that they have any other requirements that the money be spent on academic purposes or used for in the classroom and not for administrative expenses or any other requirements on the school?
I'm aware of.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Can we get a list of the eligible charitable organizations and or all the schools that could possibly receive this money? Okay. Thank you so much.
Title sufficient do pass as amended.
Motion is title sufficient do pass as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Ayes have it. Got a supplemental. Two more bills. One was in a double referred to municipality. All right, the first bill is House Bill 1. This is the tax proposal sent down from the House. The amendment you see in here is an amendment. I'm gonna go through the amendment. It's essentially the Senate tax plan. In Section 1, it reduces the tax rate on taxable income in excess of $10,000 to 25 basis points a year, starting in 2027 to 3.75, and 28 to 3.5, and 29 to 3.25, and 3% in 2030. Thereafter, calendar year 2030, it provides that in 2031, there may be further reductions in the income tax rate on taxable income over $10,000 if certain conditions safeguarding the fiscal stability are met. First, the Working Cash Stabilization Reserve Fund must be fully funded, and it is our position that we're going to, in another bill, we're going to make a change to the Working Cash Stabilization Fund from 10% of appropriations to a 12% of revenue. And then by 2030, it has to be a 13% of revenue number to be fully funded. If that provision is met, the next trigger that would activate is whether or not the difference between the amount of revenue that is generated in the prior year, fiscal year, exceeds the appropriation of the following year. All right, so the gap in what we bring in revenue and what we spend the next year, that number, that difference is the number we'll use, and we'll take that number, and the trigger is going to be 1% cost of the cost to reduce the income tax rate by 1%. Right now, it's about $400 million. So we take that number, a $400 million number, and that's the barometer. We're going to judge whether or not the economy has grown and take the excess revenue over expenses. And if that number is 85% of that $400 million number to cut 1%, we're going to reduce the income tax rate by 20 basis points. If the economy is doing better and there's a $400 million excess, we'll reduce it by 25 basis points. If the economy is even doing better and there's a 115% increase over the $400 million cost, we'll reduce the income tax rate the following year by 30 basis points. So depending on how the economy is performing and if these triggers are met, we will have ability to reduce the income tax in the out years until it is eliminated. Now, those numbers we will I'll pass out on the floor. If this passes the committee, we'll have some numbers to show you on paper what it looks like. But you're essentially taking the difference in the revenue generated and the expenses from the appropriations in the following year, and that difference is compared against the cost of a 1% rate cut. And like I said, if it's 85% of that rate cut, we'll knock 20 basis points off the rate the following year. If it's $400 million over, we'll do 25 basis points. And if it's 115% over the number, we'll knock 30 basis points out. So the strength of our economy will dictate whether or not a cut is warranted going forward. And the rest of the bill has the same provisions as the Senate plan did. We'll reduce the grocery tax from 7 to 5 beginning in July 1 of 2025. Section 4 makes conforming amendments to the grocery tax exception to the City of Jackson's authority to levy a 1% sales tax on activities taxed at 7%, because the groceries will no longer be at 7. Section 5 brings forward the code sections levying the use tax. Section 6 increases the excise tax on gasoline, similar to the Senate plan, 3 cents a year. Tax rate will be indexed from 7/1 of 29 and every other year after. Section 7 and 8 make the same adjustments as Section 5, but for the special fuels, the dyed and non-dyed and kerosene. Section 9 and 10 are conforming amendments to certain references to the special fuel tax. Section 11, starting at line 1035, provides for the apportionment of the revenue from the portion of the excise tax on gasoline and special funds above 18%. So any of the new money that is coming in will be apportioned according to Section 11. And from those collections, 23.25% will go to the Office of State Aid Road, 2.75% will go to the Strategic Multimodal Investment Fund, 74% will go to MDOT for constructing, maintaining, improving segments of highways, bridges under its jurisdiction, according to their 3-year plan. Section 12, starting at line 1654, adjust the distribution of revenue from the excise tax on gasoline and special fuels that is apportioned under the other sections. On or before September 25 and monthly thereafter, the funds, $5 million, an amount equal to 23.25% of the funds. This is the part that goes to state aid road. It's going to increase the minimums that state aid road gets in Section 12. And in 3 years, it'll actually double the amount of money the state aid road gets. Section 12 also adjusts the distribution of sales tax revenue after the application of the 5% grocery tax. This is the current distribution rates that help make all of these funds that are, get money off the diversions whole. 1A is for sales in municipality, 18.5% of general sales tax revenue and 25.9% of grocery tax revenue. That makes the cities whole from the decrease in grocery tax. For sales to the campuses of state institutions of higher learning or community colleges, the 18.5% of general sales tax revenue and 25.9% of grocery tax revenue to the institutions. For sales in the city of Jackson, 9% of the general sales tax revenue and 12.6% of grocery tax revenue to the CCID project fund. 1D is for sales in a TIF district. It goes from 18.5% on general sales tax revenue to 25.9% for grocery tax revenue to make sure those TIF districts aren't impacted. 2.266 of general sales tax revenue and 3.17 of grocery tax revenue to the school ad valorem tax reduction fund is in section 7 under 12, up to $42 million. And then 8 is 9.073 of general sales tax revenue and 12.7% of grocery tax revenue to the EEF fund. Section 13 adjusts the distribution of use tax revenue after the application of a 5% grocery tax. Current distribution rate is 15% to municipalities, 15% to counties for infrastructure is maintained, but the revenue collected from use tax corresponding to the 5% grocery tax, the rate is instead distributed at 21% to municipalities and 21% to counties. And then section 14 through 22 deal with PERS, the fifth tier, and the ORP, which I can allow Senator Sparks to explain section 14 through 22 of the bill. Now, actually, ORP is another section later, but I'll defer to Senator Sparks to discuss those sections of the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The sections that address PERS is the Tier 5 that we passed on the floor. This is the same plan that we presented that is endorsed, as I passed out to you on that day, by the PERS board, which is a hybrid going forward for employees hired after March 1st, 2026, which is 4% to a defined benefit, 5% to a defined contribution, with the same level of service credits that we had spoken of when we passed it on the Senate side. To my knowledge, there's not any change from what was presented to you earlier. It is an 8-year vesting, 8-year compensation as far as your high 8, and there is no guaranteed COLA. It is an ad hoc COLA that can be added by the legislature in future years. There is also no partial lump sum option, as there will be a 5% of the employee contribution that will go into a defined contribution account, which is similar to a 401k. There's immediate vesting in that program that would be transferable as similar programs are. There would be the ability for 4 years of military service credit, which is current in the PERS package that we currently have, and we're allowing that to continue. There would not be buy-in of other magnitudes that would be service credit or things of that nature to add as far as leave time or sick time. Then the defined benefit piece and the defined contribution piece would be eligible for contributions from the employer, particularly on the defined contribution side, that there's optional variable contributions that are eligible to be made. And as far as there were some questions as far as how the defined contribution piece operates, it would operate very similarly to our current deferred compensation 527s that are managed by choice of risk by our individual members. It's not that they're going out and picking stocks. They're literally picking a package and portfolio that's presented to them very similar to the deferred compensation programs that are currently active. As far as years in work, the retirement age is 62 with 30 years of service for full retirement, 65 and 8 or more years for an unreduced retirement, or at any age with 35 years of service. Again, every bit of this is the same as the information that was presented to you when we passed it off the floor earlier this year. In addition, it does also end the SLRP program, which is a special legislative retirement program that anyone after that March 1st, 2026 date, that would not be a program that would exist anymore for them. And as it relates to ORP, this is one area that is different than what we presented on the floor. We are capping that rate at what it is current. That rate is 14.9%. So I will remind you that the members of ORP are putting up 9%, and they're being matched currently at 14.9. We would freeze that rate at that point as far as going into their defined contribution plan. The balance would go toward the unfunded actuarial liability, which we have another 1.5 of increase to go to 19.9 that we have all voted for, and that will equate to about $7.5 million that will go toward the UAL that otherwise would not. Between the time of hopeful passage of this bill from July 1 until March 1st of 2026, when the Tier 5 would begin accepting employees, if there's an ORP eligible person in the IHL institutions, they can offer them ORP, but it will be at a rate of up to 9%. They will not receive 14.9. They will be able to receive up to 9% as a match, which is still much more lucrative than any match program, DC, that I'm aware of in the region. That is an explanation of our PERS portion of the bill. And again, aside from the one ORP explanation in a change of leaving and freezing the rate at 14.9 instead of cutting it to 9, it is the same package we passed out of committee. And Mr. Chairman, I would yield any questions if there are any.
All right. And that's a explanation of the bill. Senator Bryan for a question.
Somewhere in there was something that we all voted for. What was that we all voted for?
We passed 4 unique bills that dealt with the public employees retirement system, 2 of which were drafted and requested by PERS themselves, one of which ORP was requested last year, and the current version we're putting forth is what was adopted and endorsed last year. And the 4th bill was the PERS endorsed Tier 5, which they've asked for a Tier 5 for 2 years, but they endorsed that bill. So all 4 of them had PERS involvement, and certainly the Tier 5 had the endorsement. I didn't ask for an endorsement for ending SLRP. That is the one piece that I think we did on our own without endorsement.
My question was the reference that we all voted for. I don't think I voted for that.
If I said we all voted, I do apologize. We passed and sent it to the other end of the hall. My apologies.
Any other questions on the bill? Senator Fillingane for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are there any new entrants into ORP allowed under this version of the bill? Should we pass it?
Under this version of the bill, there would be new ORP entrants allowed from July 1 of 25 until March 1st of 2026, until the Tier 5 is up and running. Otherwise, there would be a bit of limbo. Anyone who comes in that is ORP eligible, and there's a lot to discuss in who's really eligible, because there's a statutory eligibility, and then there is the rules and the plan by the PERS board that has addressed people who are eligible. They would be eligible to be an ORP participant, but their compensation as far as an employer match would be capped at 9%. It would be up to 9%.
Window you just described
That's correct.
ends for everyone at what?
At the beginning of Tier 5, which is contemplated in this bill to be March 1st, 2026.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Polk for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When you were explaining the fuel portion of the bill, you used the word similar to what the Senate passed and sent to the House. What makes it not exactly?
Oh, it is exactly. I'm just said exactly like.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Polk, for clarifying that. Senator Blunt for a question.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I don't see a reverse repealer in this bill. So unless but if the House fails to concur, then this bill, including the sections involving the Public Employees Retirement System and Section 25, would go to conference. Is that correct?
I guess if they didn't concur, they would probably invite conference.
Thank you.
Senator Simmons for a question.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. As a follow-up to Senator Blunt's question, if the House concurs with this bill after it's transmitted from the Senate, then it goes straight to the governor?
According to 8th grade civics, that's what the next step would be.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none for a motion. Motion is titled, Senator Bryan, would you like to speak on the bill or?
Well, I didn't know if we were going to first adopt the amendment and then pass the bill, but I would like to speak whenever it's appropriate.
Senator Johnson? Move adoption of the amendment. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. Senator Bryan, you're recognized to speak on the bill.
This is a very sad day, and future generations can look back to this moment on March the 17th, 2025, when the Senate capitulated to this absurd notion that we should abolish the state income tax, because that is the most important thing we can do for the state of Mississippi, is to abolish the income tax. Why? 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 I know the snake oil salesman who showed up in Mississippi selling this bill of goods must be laughing uncontrollably that they've put this one over on the rubes in Mississippi. It's just nonsense. It's hard to know where to start. But it's clear that if this bill gets on the books, ultimately the income tax will be abolished in Mississippi. And as the years go by, eventually whatever trigger is, the trigger will get pulled, and there will be, and there goes something like a quarter, whatever it is, of the general fund. Of course, for the first 5 years, there's a tax cut no matter what. Long term, what the state needs to prosper is infrastructure, which can only come from the government. We need 4-lane highways. There's some money here for 4-lane highway, for highway maintenance, but it's not going to be sufficient. We cannot run road construction off the gasoline tax because as years go by, more and more and more cars will be using less and less and less gasoline. The cost of highways is through the roof. I've told the story many times about the interchange in Tupelo, which would be a very fine interchange. It would open up the possibility of a interstate designated road going ever how far south on 45 you chose to go. But this one interchange in Tupelo, which is a bottleneck, would cost well over $100 million for that one interchange. A while back, we passed legislation for this huge industrial site in Marshall County, and that interchange will be well over $100 million. That's $100 million just for a couple of interchanges, and I was here when we four-laned highways all over the state for $600 million. And four-lane highways for the foreseeable future are going to be essential for economic development. We have water and sewer that is aging, water pipes more than a century old. Those have got to be improved if we're going to have running water, we're going to have sanitary sewer. Where's that money going to come from? The local people don't have the money to do that. It's ironic that this Rube Goldberg contraption about the retirement system is attached to this bill. What a conglomeration of bad ideas. But I want to make this one thing clear. When employees pay their 9% into the retirement system, they're just about paying for all of their retirement. The average employee today is getting very little, if any, match for his or her 9% contribution. All of the assessments on payroll, except for basically some spare change, is going to pay the debt, going to pay for benefits for those who have been employed in the past, and for benefits that are owed to current employees who are under the legacy system. It's going to take an infusion of cash from the state coffers to keep the retirement system alive. You can't do it with a fifth tier defined contribution plan or a partridge in a pear tree. It just doesn't matter. And if we were going to do anything about the retirement system and come up with a fifth tier, you would think we would do something about the overwhelming inequity in the system, which penalizes those who retire at a later age and benefits those who retire quickly. And the last thing we want to do is reward people who retire quickly. But we have that perverse incentive, which is still in this plan. There's some features that make it a bit less perverse, but it's still there. The idea behind the cost of living adjustment is primarily to make sure that people who live a very long time after retirement don't have a benefit that becomes essentially worth less and less and less because of inflation. One thing which would help would be to have a COLA which started at age 70, so that at least for those who live a long time, inflation doesn't completely eat up their base. But that isn't in here because that wasn't in the Senate plan. We can't change one word in the Senate plan, no matter what, because it let full grown out of the head of Zeus, and there it is. We can't change it. It's got a proposal in there that the legislature can have an ad hoc cost of living adjustment. That's what got us in the mess in the first place. There's nothing worse than an ad hoc adjustment which the legislature can do. But we can't change that. That's there. It's all perfect. There we have it. But back to the tax bill. The only feature that we have in our whole tax structure that doesn't fall disproportionately on people of lower and modest incomes is the income tax. The income tax of the sales tax falls most heavily on those who earn the least amount of money because it's just this simple. If you've got a job and you're earning $30,000 a year, you're going to spend a pretty large percentage of that money on things subject to the sales tax. But if you're earning $300,000 a year, you're not going to pay 10 times the amount of sales tax. You may pay a little bit more, but disproportionately the sales tax falls on the people who are struggling. The sales tax gets at least some money from out-of-state corporations. National corporations pay at least some of the sales tax, the income tax. So we get this income tax money, which comes into the state of Mississippi from national corporations. When you cut the income tax, you're taking money out of the Mississippi economy and sending it to national corporations. As I say, it's a great deal for Walmart. The Walmart heirs ought to be giggling. And we're having this discussion against the background where we know we've got budget problems out the wazoo staring us right in the face. And for some reason, because of this obsession with the income tax cut, we're blind to what's right in front of us. 40% of our budget, $13 billion a year, comes from the federal government. Every day we hear that more and more and more federal funds are being impounded. We don't even know how much federal money that's built into next year's budget that we're voting on right now is going to get cut and not going to be there. Let alone what lies ahead in the future. The reason we've got money in the Treasury right now is not because anybody in Mississippi's so smart or wise or prudent. The United States government printed up a pile of money for a stimulus program. They sent a lot of that money to poor people. When you do that, not only do we get our fair share from the stimulus, but we get a pile of money going to poor people because we got them in Mississippi. And when poor people get money, they spend it. And that money gets into the economy and turns over and over again. That's why we've had such good tax collections the last little bit. But that effect is drying up. That effect is going away. That's going to have a downward effect on our budget. And we know that. Every hour on the half hour, there's a new tariff, or there's not a tariff, or there is a tariff. We don't know what sort of impact those tariffs are going to have on the economy, but it's pretty certain they're going to have some sort of big impact. The odds are it's not going to be positive. That's going to hurt the economy. That's going to hurt our our tax collections. That's staring us right in the face. We know that. The demand for highways money is going to go up. The demand for retirement system is going to go up. It's just a most inopportune time to be doing something like this. And for some reason, we absolutely must, right here in 2025, tie the hands of future legislatures forever, because all wisdom is vested in the 2025 legislature. Heaven forbid we should let the poor souls who are here in 2031 figure out what they need to do about taxes in 2031. No, we've got to lock them into this system. unless they can get up the votes to undo what we've done. It just seems to me that what lies ahead is insufficient funds for public schools, insufficient funds for basic services. All of us get calls every day for somebody wants this, that, or the other thing from a state agency. They want to get a water system inspected. They want to get, but where's the money going to be to do that? How are you going to hire the people to do it? It seems to me the wrong bill at the wrong time. For that reason, I'm going to vote no. And for that reason, I'm profoundly sad for the future of the state.
Thank you, Senator Bryan. Any other discussion on the bill? Seeing none for a motion. Motion is title sufficient to pass as amended. All those in favor say aye. All opposed say no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. That bill be reported out. Next bill is House Bill 733. Senator McMahon, recognize you to explain the bill.
The welfare of our cities is important to the Lieutenant Governor and to Chairman Harkins and to myself. This proposed bill before you will give a new tool to municipalities. In Section 1, it would it goes through the definitions, but basically we would be creating, I'm going to paraphrase, we'll be creating a grant and loan revolving fund that would be administered by the Mississippi Home Corporation. Section 2 establishes the revolving fund, gives them the authority to promulgate rules. Section 3 is it authorizes a municipality to apply for these loans. Section 3 receives a loan for the revolving fund to authorize or pledge a repayment. Section 4 gives them the authority to apply for a grant or for the money. Section 5 is would be subject to bonding, but what I would like to do is if this committee chooses, we'll move this forward, but we'll probably on the floor, we'll have an amendment to strip the bonding out of it and make it an appropriation, subject to appropriations. But for the sake of moving it forward and not sending it back to municipalities, I would ask you to leave that in there today. And Section 6, this bill was amended in committee, but the copy before you does not include the amendment. It does have a reverse repealer in it. And so on the floor, that would be something else we would want to do is remove the reverse repealer. But I yield for any questions.
All right. Are there any questions on the bill? Seeing none for a motion.
Title sufficient, do pass.
Motion is title sufficient, do pass. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed? The ayes have it.
Rise and report.
Motion's rise and report. All those in favor say aye. All opposed? The ayes have it.